When my cousin Rachel called me about her new house, she sounded over the moon. She said she'd found this charming old Victorian on the edge of town 2 stories tall. Lots of character, and the kind of creaky charm you'd see in a movie. But what got me was the price. Dirt cheap, almost unbelievably low for something that size. She joked that maybe it was haunted, and we both laughed. At the time, it seemed like one of those lucky finds, a once-in-a-lifetime deal you jump on, before someone else snatches it up. I had just quit my job, burned out, exhausted, and unsure of what to do next. I welcomed the chance to help her move in. It felt like a small adventure, a weekend project to get my mind off things. I packed a duffel bag and drove down 2 hours through winding roads and overgrown fields. The GPS stopped working 10 minutes before I arrived, and I had to rely on screenshots and instinct to find her place. That should have been my first sign technology giving up on the place before I even reached it. The house stood at the edge of a patch of woods, with no neighbors for what looked like half a mile in either direction. A rusted gate leaned sideways. At the end of the gravel driveway, the paint was chipped, windows foggy with dust, but it had a strange presence to it. Not quite welcoming, not quite hostile, just quiet. Too quiet. Rachel greeted me at the front steps with a huge grin and a clipboard full of ideas for renovation. She was excited, hopeful, talking about repainting the porch and fixing the attic windows. I tried to match her enthusiasm, but something about the place gnawed at me. The trees surrounding it were unnaturally still, even though the wind tugged at my jacket. The air was heavy, like it hadn't been moved in years. It didn't feel abandoned, it felt waiting. The inside was what you'd expect: old wooden floors, high ceilings, and that dusty, antique smell that comes with age. The kitchen was wide and open, though outdated. The furniture left behind was covered in white sheets, which made the whole place feel like a forgotten memory someone was trying to keep covered. We got to work unloading boxes, sweeping floors, and joking about starting a ghost hunting YouTube channel. But as we moved from room to room, I couldn't help but notice how dim the house felt, even with all the windows open. Sunlight barely touched the hallway, and some corners seemed to swallow light whole. In particular, there was a narrow door, just past the kitchen flush with the wall, painted the same color, almost easy to miss. Something about it made me pause. It was locked with a heavy latch, newer than everything else in the house. I pointed it out, and Rachel rolled her eyes. "Oh, that," she said. "The realtor said, it's just a basement. Told me not to worry about it. Probably just full of junk." But she didn't sound casual. She avoided looking at the door too long. Her tone clipped, like she was repeating something she didn't fully believe. I asked if she had a key. "No idea. I don't even want to go down there." She tried to laugh it off, but I caught the way her eyes lingered on it, like she was expecting something to move behind the door. I told myself not to make a big deal of it. It was just an old basement, probably cobwebs, maybe some old furniture or water damage. But even as we unpacked dishes and made jokes about ghosts, that door kept drawing my attention. Not because of what was behind it, but because of how wrong. It felt like it didn't belong to the rest of the house, like it had been added for something or someone. The first night passed without incident. We were both exhausted from moving, covered in dust, and too tired to notice anything strange. We made makeshift beds in the living room, surrounded by half-opened boxes and takeout containers. The house creaked a little as it settled, which felt normal for something that old. Rachel had left a few lamps on in different rooms to make it feel less eerie, and I remember falling asleep to the soft hum of a playlist she had playing on her phone. It was around 2:17 a.m. when I first heard it. A low thump, dull and deliberate, like something heavy being dropped slowly onto wood. I opened my eyes in the dark. The lamp nearest me was still on, casting a pale yellow circle across the floor. I waited, holding my breath, unsure if I'd imagined it. Then I heard it again, thump, slower this time. A pause, then another. Rachel stirred on the couch across from me, blinking awake. "Did you hear that?" she asked in a hushed voice, already sitting up. I nodded slowly. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was beneath us, directly beneath us. The basement. We sat there for a few minutes, listening. The noises weren't constant. There would be a loud thump, followed by silence, then a dragging sound, then more silence. Something was moving under the floorboards. At first, I tried to reason with it, maybe old pipes knocking around, or the old water heater shifting as it cooled. But those thoughts didn't explain the dragging, or how measured and intentional the sounds felt. It was too rhythmic, too deliberate to be mechanical. I got up and crept closer to the kitchen, where the basement door stood closed. The hallway felt colder than the rest of the house. I stared at the door for a long time, waiting for some sign of movement. Nothing happened, but the sounds continued, faint thumps, the occasional scraping noise, and sometimes, when I really strained my ears, I could swear I heard breathing. Deep, slow, muffled breathing, like someone was just standing on the other side, pressing their face against the wood, listening back. We didn't sleep much that night. We ended up turning all the lights on and sitting in the living room, trying to talk ourselves out of our paranoia. Rachel said the house was probably just settling, but I could see how tense her shoulders were, how her eyes kept darting toward the hallway. The next morning, we tried to brush it off. We blamed it on exhaustion and an overactive imagination. We kept busy in packing, organizing, cleaning, but the feeling lingered. The basement door became a silent presence we both avoided. Every time I walked past it, I got a strange chill. Not the kind that comes from cold air, but the kind that prickles at your skin, like you're being watched, like something behind that door was aware of you. That night, the noises started again. Earlier this time, around 1:30 a.m. Louder, thump, drag, thump, drag. Rachel sat upright, without a word. I didn't even have to ask, she'd heard it too. We turned off the playlist, turned off the TV, and just listened. The sounds were more aggressive now, closer, as if whatever it was had moved further toward the stairs. There was a moment where we both sat completely still, and we heard a creak one of the wooden basement steps. Something was climbing up. We held our breaths. The sound stopped. No footsteps, no thumps, just silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Rachel got up, walked to the hallway, and I followed. We stood there together, staring at the basement door. The air felt different, thicker, almost like it was pressing down on us. She reached for the doorknob, but pulled her hand back instantly. It was ice cold. We hadn't turned on the air conditioning. There were no vents nearby. The cold was coming. From the other side, from below. That's when we realized we weren't dealing with creaky pipes or a settling house. Something was down there. Something that didn't sleep. Something that wanted us to know it was listening, too. By the fourth day, I couldn't take it anymore. The noises weren't stopping. In fact, they were growing bolder. We tried pretending everything was fine, keeping ourselves busy during the day, but the tension between us was thick. Rachel had started jumping at every little sound. She kept her phone flashlight on, even during daylight hours, and she hadn't gone near the basement door since that second night. It was like the fear was growing inside the walls, seeping into every corner of the house. And still, that door remained closed, shut tight, latched. I told her I was going to open it. She froze. Her hands trembled slightly as she dried a dish she hadn't really washed. I expected her to argue, to say something, but instead she just looked at me and whispered, "Be careful." The key wasn't easy to find. It wasn't on the main ring with the others. I ended up digging through drawers, lifting couch cushions, until I found it tucked into a rusted tin box at the back of a kitchen cabinet. A single old key flat, thin, with a small tag on it that simply read B. My stomach turned when I held it in my hand. Something about it felt wrong, like it had waited years to be touched again. I stood in front of the basement door and took a deep breath. Rachel stood behind me, not saying a word, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a heavy click. The sound echoed down the hall like a warning. The latch creaked as I unhooked it and pulled the door open. A wave of cold, damp air rolled out. It smelled of mildew, wet earth, and something else. Something older, something sour. The kind of scent you don't recognize until you've smelled death. The stairs were narrow and steep, descending into pitch blackness. There was no light switch I could find, so I used the flashlight on my phone. The beam cut through the dark, just enough to show dust particles swirling in the air, thick and undisturbed. The wood groaned under my feet as I took the first few steps down, each creak sharper than the last. Rachel stayed at the top, not saying a word. The basement wasn't big, just one large rectangular room with cracked concrete floors and stone. Walls, pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping occasionally. In one corner sat a pile of old furniture, all covered in yellowed sheets. Another corner had a rusted shelving unit filled with jars of God knows what. But what stood out most was the far wall. It didn't match the others. It was made of newer bricks, clean, even. To clean, I walked toward it, feeling my heart hammer against my ribs. My flashlight flickered, just once. Then again, I stopped in front of the wall and raised my hand to touch it. The bricks felt cool, smooth, not at all like the damp stone. Around them, I tapped on it, hollow. I whispered Rachel's name up the stairs, but she didn't answer. I reached out and pressed against one of the bricks. It wiggled slightly under my hand. Carefully, I pulled it loose, then another and another. Dust poured out. Something shifted inside the wall. Behind the fourth brick, I found a dark void. A tunnel, not a crawl space, not a simple vent. A deep, narrow tunnel leading into total darkness. My flashlight flickered again. Then I saw it. Movement, something inside. The tunnel moved just past the edge of the light. Slow, slithering. Then a hand, pale, almost grey, with long, bony fingers. The nails were cracked and yellow. The skin looked like wax, stretched too tightly over joints. The hand reached out from the darkness and stopped just before the opening, as if it knew I was watching, as if it wanted to be seen. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My voice caught somewhere deep in my throat as I stumbled back, kicking over a stack of boxes I hadn't noticed behind me. My flashlight slipped from my hand, clattering against the concrete floor and spinning. Wildly, its beam darting across the basement like a frantic eye. It landed facing the wall, the light quivering across the now open bricks. I saw that hand clearly in the beam, no longer reaching, just resting against the edge, waiting. The fingers twitched once. Just a little movement, as if stretching, or testing the air. I backed up, still unable to tear my eyes away, my hands trembling so badly I could barely keep balance. My body screamed at me to run, but my legs weren't listening. I kept staring, convinced that if I blinked, it would lunge forward. The breathing started next, slow and labored, not from me. It came from the tunnel. It was deep and raspy, almost wet, as if each inhale had to claw its way up through a throat that hadn't used air in decades. My chest tightened. There was nothing between me and that hand now but a few feet of cold, dusty air. I knew it could reach me. I knew it was choosing not to. Then the hand began to retreat, not in a normal way. It didn't pull back like a person would. It sort of folded in on itself, like the bones were bending the wrong way. It twisted as it disappeared into the tunnel's darkness, vanishing without a sound. My flashlight flickered again, then died. Completely, I scrambled in the dark, my hands finding the stairs faster than my eyes could adjust. I climbed up them too, 3 at a time, nearly falling forward in my rush. I slammed the basement door shut and relatched it, pressing my back against it as my heart pounded in my ears. Rachel was standing at the end of the hall. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. She didn't ask me what happened. I didn't need to say anything. I think she already knew. I sat on the kitchen floor, trying to breathe. My hands were cold and covered in dust. I couldn't stop shaking. That wall those bricks, it was like someone had tried to seal it shut, but not to keep people out. It felt more like they were trying to keep something in. I asked Rachel again if she knew anything else about the house. Anything at all. The realtor might have said that she hadn't told me yet. At first, she said no. Then her face changed. Not guilt, exactly. More like something had just clicked. She said there had been a man who lived there before. Not the previous owner, but years before that, maybe decades. A recluse. No family, no friends, barely left the house. One day, he just vanished. They never found a body. Nothing, only the dog. She said the dog was discovered days later, inside the house, scratching at the basement door. No one knew how it had gotten trapped inside. The strange part was, there were no signs of forced entry, no unlocked doors. It was as if the man had simply ceased to exist. I asked her if she believed he might still be down there, or something else. She didn't answer. She just kept looking at the basement door like it might open on its own at any moment. I checked the latch again, even moved a chair in front of it. The silence in the house was heavier now, like it was watching us. Both, like the walls had eyes. I wanted to believe I'd imagined it all, that the cold, the hand, the breathing were just the product of an overworked mind and a very creepy house. But deep down, I knew better. I'd seen it. I'd felt it. There was something inside that wall, something buried behind those bricks. And whatever it was awake. That night was the worst. We didn't speak much after I came back up from the basement. Rachel made tea with shaking hands, and we sat in the living room like two strangers, trying not to acknowledge the elephant in the house. Every creak made us flinch. Every gust of wind outside made us pause and listen. But the house was dead silent now, as if whatever had moved beneath our feet had retreated to wait for the perfect moment. We didn't even try to sleep. Rachel curled up on the couch, blanket pulled up to her chin, and I sat in the armchair across from her. Flashlight clutched in my hand, even though the batteries were probably near dead. The basement door stayed closed, the chair still wedged up against it, but that didn't comfort me. I didn't trust wood and metal to keep something like that inside. Whatever it was, it had already reached through a wall. A latch wouldn't stop it if it wanted out. Around 3:06 a.m., the silence broke. It didn't start with the thumping this time. It was scratching, not loud, subtle, like fingernails dragging lightly along the wood of the basement door. Back and forth, slow, purposeful. I didn't say anything. I just looked at Rachel. Her eyes were wide open. She'd heard it too. We didn't move. We just listened. The scratching went on for nearly 5 minutes. Then it stopped. We held our breath. Then something else started, a voice. Faint, dry, and hoarse. Not a full whisper, but something softer than speech. It was too quiet to understand, but the tone made my skin crawl. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even threatening. It was inviting. It sounded like it was trying to coax someone in. Rachel covered her ears, shaking her head violently. I sat frozen in the chair, flashlight aimed at the hallway, trying to convince myself I was hallucinating. The voice faded after a while. Or maybe I stopped hearing it because I was too focused on the new sound. Footsteps, not from below, but from the hallway, bare feet on wood. Slow, deliberate. They didn't come from the basement door. They came from upstairs. We hadn't been upstairs since the first day. The steps creaked softly, one after the other, down the staircase. Rachel's mouth opened like she was about to scream, but no sound came out. I turned the flashlight on and pointed it toward the hallway, just in time to catch a glimpse of something passing through the shadows at the bottom of the stairs. It wasn't shaped right. It looked like a person, but distorted, taller than a man, but bent at the middle, dragging one leg behind the other. Its arms too long, fingers scraping the wall as it moved. The hallway lights flickered once and then died. I heard Rachel begin to sob quietly under her blankets. I stood up slowly, the flashlight flickering in my hand, the beam jittery and weak. Whatever it wasn't in the hallway anymore. I didn't hear its steps. I didn't hear breathing, but I could feel it. The pressure in the room changed. The air was suddenly colder, thicker, like we were underwater. My ears rang with silence. I stepped closer to the hallway and called out. My voice came out thin and shaky. There was no response, just the sound of wood gently settling beneath some unseen weight. I turned the flashlight toward the base of the stairs, and for a brief moment, I saw it again, its hand wrapping around the edge of the wall. Not reaching this time, just resting there, almost like it wanted to be seen, almost like it was posing for me. Rachel screamed. Not a loud, frantic scream, just a broken, breathless gasp that made me turn back. I didn't see it move, but somehow, it was gone. The hand, the shape, the weight of it, all of it, disappeared like it had slipped into another layer of the house, one we weren't meant to see, one that overlapped with ours, waiting for the right moment to tear through. We left before sunrise. There was no dramatic escape, no crashing through windows or desperate sprint to the car. We just stood there in silence for a long time, until Rachel finally whispered, "We need to go." Her voice was flat, stripped of emotion, like whatever lived in that house had already drained her dry. We didn't pack. We didn't take food or chargers or the half-unpacked boxes still littering the living room. We grabbed our bags and keys and walked out into the dark morning, barely speaking, hearts pounding at the thought of what might follow us down that hallway. The door clicked shut behind us like a sigh of relief, or maybe a promise. The sky was still a deep navy blue, not quite night, not yet day. The gravel crunched under our shoes as we crossed the yard, the wind picking up for the first time in days, cold and fast, like it was trying to chase us off the land. Rachel didn't even lock the door behind her. She just walked to her car, hands shaking as she fumbled with the keys. I followed, glancing once back at the house. The upper window, the one from the attic, was open, just slightly. I don't remember the drive. I barely remember the next 2 days. Everything blurred together in a haze of sleep-deprived silence. Rachel stayed with a friend. I went back to my apartment and didn't turn off the lights for 3 nights straight. I kept the TV on to anything, to fill the quiet, anything to drown out the sound of dragging footsteps that I couldn't forget. We talked only once after we left. She called to say she was selling the house, no matter the loss. She didn't care. I could tell she hadn't slept. Her voice had that same hollow note in it, like someone who had gone somewhere dark and left a part of themselves behind. She said she couldn't stop thinking about the basement, or the scratching, or that figure in the hallway. She asked me if I thought it was real. I didn't answer her. Weeks went by. The house sold faster than expected, to an older couple who, according to Rachel's brief update, didn't ask a single question about the place. They paid in cash. No inspection. I stopped checking in after that. It felt better not to know. I figured if anything happened to them, I'd read about it. But nothing ever came up. No missing persons. No strange news stories. It was like the house had gone back to sleep, satisfied for now. Still, I can't forget it. Certain things stay with you. That first glimpse of the hand behind the bricks. The sound of breath coming from a tunnel that shouldn't exist. The way the house changed once it knew we had seen what we weren't supposed to. It was like living in someone else's nightmare, one that you couldn't wake up from even after you escaped. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't opened that wall, if I hadn't gone into the basement at all. Would the noises have stopped? Would it have moved on to someone else? Or was it always meant to find us, to show itself? There are still nights I wake up suddenly, my heart racing for no reason. No sound, no movement, just that cold, heavy silence pressing down. Again, like a presence that followed me, tucked itself away in the back of my thoughts, waiting, watching. Rachel doesn't talk about the house anymore. She moved to another state, got a new job, made new friends. I think she's trying to forget. I tried to. I even convinced myself it was all in our heads. Stress, lack of sleep, some shared psychological spiral triggered by an old house and a locked basement. But that explanation never really sat right with me, because sometimes, in the quietest moments, just before sleep or right before dawn, I hear it again, that slow, steady scratching on wood, the faint creak of a stair under unseen weight, the whisper that seems to come from just beneath the floor.